Good morning, everybody. We're going to call the House Agriculture and Natural Resources Subcommittee to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Representative Cochran, Darby, here. Halford, Holsey, here. Hurt, here. Potts, Reedy, here. Shaw, here. Chairman Todd.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
Thank you for that, and I'll ask for any personal orders this morning. Seeing none, I will read our fact of the day. The first white-tailed deer was discovered by early American settlers during the 17th century and was a totally new breed that Europeans had never seen before. From the 17th century to the 20th century, market hunting, over-harvesting, and a lack of effective hunting laws over the years caused the whitetail populations to become nearly extinct. Because of this, wildlife agencies began implementing game laws, buck-only hunting laws, and the population and the repopulation of the white-tailed deer began to restock from the 1940s to the 1970s. I actually hunted on a piece of property as a kid and a young adult that gentleman farmer that owned the property told many times the story of the wildlife agency bringing deer in from other states to repopulate the area and how the local farmers had to sign up and agree to allow them to put it on their property. So he was instrumental in bringing them back to West Tennessee. In Tennessee, the restocking program began in 1940 through 1985. Today, there are about 900,000 wild deer in Tennessee, and this is expected to continue to increase at a 1 to 2% per year ratio, with most expansion in the Mississippi River counties and eastern Tennessee. The economy of Tennessee has benefited from the rise in deer numbers in terms of increased revenues of small businesses in rural areas, sporting goods stores, hotels, and restaurants. According to the TWRA, in 2001, Tennessee hunting expenditures, resulted in an economic impact of $654 billion. Over the next 15 years, the demand for whitetail game hunting is expected to remain the same or increase. We have several bills that have either been taken off notice or rolled for some period of time. We have item number 5, House Bill 2490 has been taken off notice. We have House Bill 2869 has been, just a second here. So House Bill 2490 has been taken off notice. House Bill 2869 has been rolled. Item number 11. Item number 12, House Bill 1910 has been rolled. Item number 13, House Bill 2637 has been rolled. Making sure I'm correct on that. 1 week. House Bill item number 14, House Bill 2634 has been rolled 2 weeks. And I think that takes care of those housekeeping items here. Representative Hurt, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. I'm probably out of order, but I was daydreaming a minute ago when you asked for any personal announcements. Today is Hemp Day on the Hill, and I would like to welcome all the Hemp Day on the Hill attendees to our committee today. So make them feel welcome, please.
Yes, thank you for being here. We're always appreciative of our citizens coming and advocating for their interest. You are instructed by the Constitution to instruct your legislators, and we appreciate you doing that. First on the agenda is item number 1 is HJR 755 by Chairman Doggett. Do I hear a motion? Have a motion and a second. Chairman Doggett, we appreciate you being here, and we recognize you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Appreciate your hospitality as I come before you on this fine Tuesday morning. House Joint Resolution 755 is very unique. It deals with an encouragement to TDEC through our state parks to place at least one adult-sized changing table in each of their state parks. There is no timeline. I do understand that there's an announcement that they will be making at a later date of some modifications that they're going to be making at state parks that'll make things accessible for all visitors that come. But this idea was brought to me from a constituent of mine who has came here numerous times with our legislative disability day on the Hill that we have, and brought the idea of adult-sized changing tables up with me. They're very beneficial to really all people from all walks of life. We have adults that have unique disabilities. We also have adults that may have Alzheimer's or other things that would need use of an adult-sized changing table. And currently in state parks, there's nowhere for visitors to come. They enjoy all the wonderful commodities that we have there at the parks, but when it comes time to making some changes, to change things that are needed, they do not have the areas available to do so. And so a lot of times, people feel as if they've lost dignity when they have to lie in a bathroom floor or a restroom floor to change themselves. And so I've been working with TDEC. They've been extremely helpful in this process, bringing this resolution. And so I look forward to what the future brings. And we already have the finest state parks in my mind in the country, but we're going to also, I think, really step it up a notch if we can get to a point to where they are more handicap accessible.
Thank you, Chairman Doggett, and I appreciate the manner in which you brought this to making an encouragement and then work behind the scenes with the department on this. Do we have any comments or questions for the presenter? Seeing none, without objection, we'll be voting on HJR 755. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Your bill moves on to full Ag Committee, sir.
Thank you so much.
Next on our list, item number 2 is House Bill 2740 by Representative Holsclaw. He may be in another committee at this point, so we will roll him to the heel of the calendar. House Bill 2223 by Chairman Powers. Do I have a motion? Motion. Second. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Powers, you are recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee. There is an amendment with this bill. If I could get it added on, it is amendment number 014192.
That's what we have, sir. We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, we'll be voting on adding the amendment 014192 to the bill. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Your amendment's added on, sir. Please let us know what this amendment does.
All right, thank you. And the amendment makes the bill. The bill is being brought to you. We've had a lot of issues with around a lot of the lakes in our area. My county, my district actually surrounds Norris Lake, which is one of the largest, and with wake boating. And we're not trying to end wake boating, but we do feel like there needs to be some regulations regarding it because of all the problems that we've been brought about with disruption to other boaters, fishermen, lake houses, if you have a dock on there, or even in the marinas, at the lake bank, the erosion on it. So what we're trying to do, the language of this bill is agreed to upon with the been working with the Water Sports Industry Association and with TWRA to come up with a way to help solve this problem that people are having with the wake boating. This bill clearly defines what wake boating and wake surfing. Wake surfing is when they slow the boat down a lot and cause the larger waves. But what we found, the standards are that those waves dissipate after a 200 feet area. So that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to set parameters for wakeboarding and wake surfing, such as one is, and this is already in most of the other bills, but they're prohibited after sunset or before sunrise, prohibited on a body of water less than 50 acres, prohibited without wearing personal flotation devices approved by the U.S. Coast Guard. And this bill specifically is going to be prohibiting wakeboarding, wake surfing within 200 feet of any shoreline, dock, pier, or any other structure located completely or partially out of the water. So that's what our bill is trying to do. And I have somebody from the water sports industry here that I've been working with on this bill because it's worked in other states that have had the same problems. And if you don't care, I'd like to go out of session and let him talk. His name's Lee Gatz. I think you all know him. He's the director of government affairs with the Water Sports Industry Association, and he's worked here in the Capitol before. And we also have Chris Richardson with TWRA to answer any questions that you might have if we can go out of session for a few minutes.
We do have these folks on our list to speak today, so without objection, we'll go out of session and hear from them. We're out of session.
Thank you.
I'll call up Mr. Lee Gatz first. Just state your name and who you're with, and be glad to hear from you for 3 minutes, sir.
Great. Well, good morning. My name is Lee Gatz.
Is that working?
Is this working? Can you hear me okay? How about now? Oh, perfect. Good morning. My name is Lee Gatz. I'm representing the Water Sports Industry Association, or the WSIA, and I'm a lifelong Tennessee resident, hailing from Livingston, Tennessee, right on Del Hollow Lake. I'm here today to convey the boating industry's support for House Bill 2223. I'd like to thank Chairman Todd and members of the subcommittee for the opportunity to speak and encourage the support of this legislation. House Bill 2223, as amended, establishes common sense guidelines for individuals and boats that engage in wakeboarding and or wake surfing, and will help ensure that these activities are done safely here in Tennessee. Ensuring the safety of those on the water is of vital importance to the recreational boating industry, and we're pleased to see proactive, sensible legislation introduced. By way of background, the Water Sports Industry Association is the towed water sport industry's leading advocate. We develop best practices, maintain waterway access rights, educate participants, and promote safety on the water, especially when engaging in towed water sports such as wakeboarding and wake surfing. Our membership in the state of Tennessee includes brands like Malibu, Mastercraft, Yamaha jet boats, and many other boat, engine, and accessory manufacturers throughout the volunteer state. Recreational boating has been an especially important economic driver during the past 2 years as coronavirus-related shutdowns and closures stalled major parts of state economies. The recreational boating industry supports nearly 700,000 American jobs across 35,000 U.S. marine-based businesses. In Tennessee alone, the industry supports over 20,000 jobs and about 700 businesses, while generating $6 billion in economic impact. This includes more than 245,000 registered boats in Tennessee. I'm here today to speak in favor of House Bill 2223 because our industry is committed to protecting fair access to Tennessee's great waters and ensuring safety of its boaters. House Bill 2223 would establish important and sensible safety regulations such as a 200-foot operating setback distance from shoreline and structures when engaged in wakeboarding or wake surfing activities, and prohibits wakeboarding and wake surfing at nighttime, which will help reduce the potential for accidents. This bill also requires riders to wear U.S. Coast Guard certified life jacket and prohibits wake surfing behind boats whose propellers extend beyond the transom or swim platform, which provides another layer of protection for our surfers. Our industry is also committed to proactive safety and education to keep our waters safe. We have a proactive education campaign that we call Wake Responsibly. The WSI's Wake Responsibly initiative focuses on educating boaters and all those who enjoy our waterways on courteous behavior. This includes the practice of staying 200 feet away from shore, minimizing repetitive passes on any portion of the shoreline, and keeping music at respectful levels on the water. Committing to these easy guidelines ensures that every moment on the lake is safe and enjoyable for all, from property owners to fellow boaters alike. The initiative also focuses on forging partnerships with state and marine law enforcement, posting and maintaining signage at boat ramps, and engaging with community members through dealerships and other means.
Mr. Gatz, your 3 minutes is up, sir. Sorry to interrupt.
I
but
apologize.
We will open it up to the committee for questions, and that's unlimited, so as long as the committee wants to ask questions.
Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Gatz? Seeing none, we'll call up our next witness, and I think that's Mr. Chris Richardson with the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Agency.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Richard, if you just introduce yourself, and you'll have the same 3-minute time limit, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Chris Richardson, Deputy Director at Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency. Certainly, I appreciate Senator Powers bringing legislation and Mr. Gatz and the Water Sports Industries Association's work on the bill. We've had an opportunity to look at the legislation and feel confident that our boating division can enforce those provisions. And so with that, we're very comfortable with the bill. And Mr. Chairman, I'll be happy to answer any questions. I can't really do a better job of kind of outlaying everything than Mr. Gatz did, and certainly happy to answer any questions if the committee has some.
Perfect. Representative Cochran?
Thank you, Mr. Richardson. I just had one quick question. Oddly enough, wakeboarding is something that I have a little bit of past experience. I'm not good at it, but I've done. We wakeboard on Tellico Lake, and so I know that there's a few places on that lake that aren't necessarily narrow, but if you've got a boat coming, if you've got boats kind of meeting each other, going opposite directions, and you're giving that respectful distance to that other boat, but both boats might be wakeboarding or wake surfing. But as you give that respectful distance to that other boat, that might push you within that 200-foot boundary at some places on Tellico Lake when you make those turns. Just want to make sure that, because I like the bill. I think everything, I think that it's keeping safety in mind and making that sport, making sure that we're respecting safety. The 200-foot thing, I just want to make sure that that's not something that TWRA would be nitpicking in that type of situation, right? When you're trying to keep that respectful distance from another boat. And there are some just areas, especially on Tellico Lake, where you're turning around those bends that get a little bit more narrow. So just could you speak to that a little bit?
Certainly, Representative Cochran, I appreciate the question. And the rules of the water obviously are much kind of less defined than necessarily the rules of the road. And there are those circumstances that dictate a maneuver by a boat operator may have to be such, and it may in fact be the safest thing to do at that time. Our officers are quite well trained and certainly have the ability to exercise discretion in those circumstances, and I would certainly expect them to do so.
Representative Cochran?
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. Just wanted to check on that.
Representative Holsey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What's the penalty for violating this?
Director Richardson?
My understanding, Representative Holsey, from the provisions of the bill, that like other violations of boating safety laws, this would be a Class C misdemeanor.
Anyone else? Thank you, sir, for your
Thank
testimony.
you, Chairman and members of the committee.
Thank you. Hearing no other testimony on our list, we'll go back into session. We're back in session. Chairman Powers, do you have any further comments?
I think they pretty well laid out the whole bill for us and everything like that, and just about protecting people and property on all of our lakes. So with that, I renew my motion.
Thank you, sir. Question has been called. Without objection, we will be voting on House Bill 2223 as amended. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Your bill moves on to full Ag Committee.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Next item, number 4 on our calendar, House Bill 1842 by Chairman Terry. We have a motion and a second. Chairman Terry, you are recognized, and we do see an amendment here, sir.
Yes, thank you. There's amendment number, I believe, 14435.
Yes, sir, that's what we have. We have a motion and a second on the amendment. Any discussion on the amendment, or does it make the bill?
It does make the bill.
Okay. Then we'll go ahead and put that on if the committee so desires. All in favor of adding amendment 14435 to House Bill 1842, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment goes on, sir. You can now give us a synopsis of what the bill as amended does.
All right. Thank you, Chairman Committee. Appreciate you guys for hearing this bill. The amendment is different than the amendment that I previously had brought to you guys, and this rewrites that bill. And it simply would correct our code and put into code what the intent and practice of TDEC has been as it relates to the process for the expansion of a landfill. Again, this is not the original amendment as I had intended, but during my research on that original bill, with multiple meetings with legal services and TDEC, it was discovered that the code currently as it's written does not necessarily properly portray the intent and practice of TDEC. It was my understanding that it was the intent of the commissioner and of that previous code to let the expansion process play out before rendering any decision by the commissioner. And any final decision, and this is the term that I learned during my research, should not be in contravention to the courts. So otherwise, it would not place the executive branch in conflict with the decision on the merits that the courts put in there. So the intent of the Tennessee Code, really it follows a process where an application is filed, and once it's completed, there's a period of public notice and comment that is allowed, and there's like a 90-day period there. The Regional Solid Waste Board would then have hearings and opine on the merits of the application. Once they have opined, an aggrieved party can challenge the ruling of the Solid Waste Board, and then at that point in time, the commissioner could act. It has not been the practice nor the intent, to my understanding, for the commissioner to intervene at any time in that process, but the code as it is currently written does not necessarily prohibit that. And so that's essentially, I would say, this is a cleanup bill of that code.
Okay, do we have any questions for the sponsor? Representative Shaw, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Sponsor. Just so what you're doing with this particular piece of legislation is cleaning the code. Is that
Representative Terry?
I would describe it as that. That's been the intent and the practice, and my understanding that that's right now. If the commissioner intervened at any section, like between the first part where the application is full, and there's supposed to be a public comment hearing, and then the board is supposed to opine on that. If the commissioner came in at some point and said, we're going to go ahead and process this, and it goes through, then there could be a lawsuit there. If after the board has opined and there's a 30-day period with which it can go to the Chancery Court, and an aggrieved person can appeal. If the commissioner opined in that, it would be, in my estimation, be premature. And so this basically cleans up and says that these processes have to play out, and that at the end, if the court rules that what the Solid Waste Board said is not arbitrary and capricious, then the commissioner is not going to put the executive branch in conflict with the judicial branch.
Representative Shaw?
would this be retroactive? In other words, when this goes into law, could somebody go back and sue in some situations where there were landfills, where there were differences in people putting in landfills? Would they be able to do that, or would it just start as a new law where it is? I guess is what I'm asking. I guess what I'm asking is, would anybody be able to go back and sue if you pass this legislation?
Representative Terry?
Great question. It says this act takes effect upon becoming law. That would probably be a question for the attorneys. I don't know. I don't know of any situation that this else would apply to.
Could we get an answer to that, Mr. Chairman?
We certainly can. We can go out of session if there's no objection and ask our legal representative. So we are out of session.
Love and Middleton, Office of Legal Services. The bill does say that it takes effect upon becoming a law, so the provisions that are in this will not apply retroactively to things. No.
Any further questions for legal? Representative Halsey? Oh, okay.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. We'll go back into session then. Back in session. Representative Halsey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The sponsor of the bill has been wrestling with this issue, I know, for 4 or 5 years, squeezed from all sides in the community that you live in and all the issues that go into it, and trying to come up with an answer to fix all this. And I don't even know all the details. I just know some of them, and I know you've been through the woods and through the water and pressed. And the problems with this one and the next bill that you have, if it has statewide application, it affects my landfills and the ones next to me, and they're screaming at me. And I'd like to get you out of the fire if I could, and get some answers with people who know and people who deal with this and people who come to the table who've got a stake in all this, and get it get it fixed to get you off the hot seat and really come up with a conclusion that we can fix this, because you're kind of unique in this state in what you're dealing with, the amount of growth that you've had and the housing developments that are all around the landfill that you have. They have to grow, and I understand that. 34 counties, I think, feed into that landfill. It's a big mess. Having said all that, and trying to pull you out of the fire, I was going to make a motion that we send this to Tasser and let people sit down and really try and solve this problem for him.
We do have a motion and a second. Let me consult for just one moment on our procedure. We're going to go out of session for about 5 minutes to check with our clerk about whether we can actually send something to Tasser without a bill or another option. So we'll go out of session.
I didn't want to summer study it because it might die.
right, we're back in session, and after consulting the clerk's office, we have understood that the proper way to do this would be for you to amend your bill to request a TASER study. And so we would, in order to do that, so that nothing negative happens to your bill this morning, then we would ask for this motion to send it to TASER, which is not really appropriate, to be withdrawn. And once that's withdrawn, then we'll ask you to roll it and get an amendment that would request a TASER study. And so if you're amenable to that, then that's the posture we're in.
I recognized.
You're recognized, sir.
Thank you. The reason for a TASER study at this point, I think, is to delay. We already have an issue with the code that we know there's a code. The amendment, as I have it drafted, was something that I had worked out with TDEC on this. I would say that the only reason for a delay or opposition at this point would either be to try to persuade the commissioner to intervene inappropriately after the judge has made a decision, or to rule in contravention of that decision. I know that there are big-time lobbying firms up here trying to delay this and to try to intervene, and I don't think that's appropriate. And so I would ask for a vote on this bill.
This, and just FYI, this is I think, a bigger issue than just this one bill. Your next bill also involves the same situation and the same topic matter, and I think the committee is feeling that we need more stakeholders involved at the table to discuss the big picture here to address all of the concerns. But
I'm at the will of the committee.
Representative Cochran, we already have somebody on the list here. Representative Cochran.
I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. And on this bill specifically, I mean, truthfully, this seems very much like a cleanup bill. I mean, I don't see anything controversial about this particular bill with Chairman Terry. The next bill, I think, is going to be more discussion. I mean, I think that's a bigger issue with the next one that we discuss. This first one, though, truthfully, I mean, seems like a very straightforward cleaning some things up. You worked with TDEC, and they pointed out the issue and legal. So I think everyone seems to be on the same page on this one. Again, I think if we want to get into a deeper discussion on that next one, I certainly agree with it. But I'm in support of this one. I think this cleans up an issue that we just happen to find in the code. So just wanted to throw that out there. The next one may be controversial. This one I don't see as that at all.
Representative Terry.
Just thank you.
Anyone else have questions or comments? Seeing none, then I need to ask Representative Halsey to withdraw his motion if he is so inclined.
I do withdraw, thank you.
And I'll withdraw second.
Thank you for that. We are back on the bill as amended. It's House Bill 1842. Any more discussion on the bill? Seeing none, without objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 1842 as amended. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. No. The ayes have it. Your bill goes on to House Full Ag Committee.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee.
We'll go to item number 6, House Bill 2558 by Representative Terry. Representative Terry, I'm looking for a motion and a second. We have a motion and a second. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. There is an amendment, 14360.
That's what we have, sir. We have a motion on the amendment and a second on the amendment. Does this make the bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay. We'll be voting on the amendment at this time to add it to House Bill 2558. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment goes on House Bill 2558. You're recognized on the bill as amended, sir.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee. And currently, we have a situation that I'm not sure has ever occurred before in this state. We have a Class 1 landfill in a growth county that is having accelerated negative impact on the finances of that county and municipality. The bill, as written, it does have statewide application. However, the parameters that are here meet these growth metrics. We already have something called the County Powers Relief Act that has similar parameters for growth counties, and so this metric isn't something that's new. It's my understanding in research of this bill that there are 7 counties that actually meet those growth parameters, but my county would be the only one that fits the criteria with having that landfill in it. Our counties, with the growth experience, we're experiencing odors, trash, traffic, buzzards, other hazards associated with the landfill, and all these have major implications on the property values in the county that is growing at an exponential rate. In a letter to the courts, my city put forth that the impact on the landfill on property values is costing them potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars in property tax and creating a direct negative financial impact that decreases their ability to maintain the infrastructure in the growing municipality. Every truck bringing garbage into the landfill has a major impact on the infrastructure as well. In order to offset this accelerated direct negative financial impact of the Class 1 landfill on a growth county, the amendment puts forth the ability of these communities to offset this burden with an additional tipping fee under certain circumstances. The county in which the landfill resides must meet these growth county parameters, and the municipality must be within 1 mile of the Class 1 landfill. The county and municipality must not approve any expansion of the landfill. The county and municipality may assess a tipping fee per ton of solid waste imported to offset the estimated cost of providing solid waste management services. The fees must be for solid waste management, including methods to mitigate the odors. The fair cost is determined by the comptroller and reported to the comptroller. The city and the county must use those funds for solid waste management service necessary to protect the health, safety, and welfare of its residents, and the bill sunsets in 8 years.
Any questions for the sponsor? As I understand it, just reading a summary here, and I want to make sure I heard you correctly because I think there might have been a speaking there. It appears that this establishes that if Rutherford County or the affected municipality actually approves the expansion of a landfill, it cannot impose a tipping fee. Is that correct?
The expansion, correct.
If they approve the expansion, they cannot impose a tipping
Correct.
fee. Okay. Again, I think this has a lot of implications. This has a lot of details in it that a lot of us are not experts in. I don't know how the committee feels, but I'm open to anyone to have any more questions for the sponsor. Or are you ready to vote? Representative Shaw?
Maybe we was on the wrong. So we couldn't make a motion to send this one to TASA. Is that maybe that was the one we were really trying to send to TASA? But would we be in proper order to do that, Mr. Chairman? I'm asking because I don't know.
We're understanding from the clerk's office that we would not be able to send something through TASER necessarily. We can, but let me make sure. I stand corrected. We can send it, but they're not required to act on it. So the proper way to do that would be for the bill to be amended and list out what TASER should do on that, and that hopefully would be more successful. But I think that from what I was understanding from some committee members is they see these two with the same issue, not necessarily the bills doing the same things, but they're affecting the same type of issue. So that was the only discussion I understood.
Well, the only problem I have is because it is statewide application. I realize it's going to fix Dr. Terry's problem, and I realize he has a problem. I realize that, but I'm a little bit reluctant because it might just put somebody else in a bad way. That's my problem in terms of voting on it for statewide application. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Representative Shaw. Representative Terry.
Thank you, and I appreciate your comments, and I would say it is statewide application, and that's how I have to get it to be constitutional. That being said, with those parameters, there's only, my understanding from the comptroller's office, there's only 7 counties that it impacts that are growth counties, and of that, my county would be the only one that has that type of landfill, and because it sunsets in 8 years, it's highly unlikely that another landfill is going to be created, or one of these other counties is going to fit that parameter. So that's how it's constitutional, but it probably will not impact your county.
Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to clarify, Chairman Terry, the additional tipping fee would be, the existing landfill, so the landfill is already there, and then they decide to expand. You couldn't put that additional tipping fee on if the landfill decided not to expand, obviously it's already very large. That doesn't trigger the tipping fee, but it's if they decide to expand, or you can do the tipping fee either way. I was just going to get some clarity on that, if you don't mind.
Representative Terry.
Thank you. So it's the tipping fee would go into effect. They would have to justify their cost for these solid waste management services, and then that tipping fee could apply to what's going on currently.
Representative Cochran.
Okay, thank you. And it's just if there's that private landfill that exists in that high growth county, then you're able to do that. And then can you tell us just a little bit just the difference in that tipping fee and maybe like the host fee that landfill might get?
Representative Terry.
Thank you. Currently, my understanding that there is a host fee that the county has that is stuck at, I guess the original contract for the host contract was 1995. And I think the last increase they got in their host fee on that contract, it went from $1 up to $1.20. I think that was in 2000. So here we are going 22 years without essentially a cost of living increase on those fees in order to offset the decrease in property values, the issues that we're having with traffic, buzzards. And so it would, we're not going to be able to catch up those 22 years, but what we're doing going forward, it would at least help mitigate some of that in the community.
Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just final follow-up. So essentially, the issues, the amount of garbage, and the negative effects resulting from that have increased exponentially, but the host fee has not.
Representative Terry.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman Halford.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does this landfill service other counties across the state?
Representative Terry.
Yes, sir. It's my understanding there are 34, including mine, I think, that have something that goes there.
Chairman Halford.
So how will that affect landfills in my neck of the woods in West Tennessee, Northwest Tennessee, if this is not expanded, or if it is expanded, how does it affect those counties in my end of the state?
Representative Terry.
This bill doesn't have anything to do with an expansion per se, whether or not that landfill can expand or not. This is dealing with them being able to put a tipping fee on to offset the solid waste management and like odor mitigation that the communities have to have.
Chairman Halford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions for the sponsor? I do have one that generated a question that I have. If we're potentially increasing tipping fees, we've got 34 different counties that would be affected by that. What would be the effect on a consumer, would you say, Representative Terry?
For the other counties, I would say that those that have gone 22 years without having an increase in their tipping fees to offset the problems that have occurred in Rutherford County, those consumers have had 22 years of a free pass, and at this point going forward, in order to justify these costs, it would be passed on to them.
So you're saying there's been no increase in tipping fees in 22 years?
My understanding is from the contract that the host agreement was it was signed in 1995. I think the first year was $1, then it was $1.10. I think it's at $1.20, and that was after on year 6.
Okay. Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, it appears we're ready to vote. So without objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 2558 as amended. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. The noes have it. The bill fails.
Thank you, Chairman and Committee.
We have next on our list, item number 7, House Bill 2270 by Representative Ogles. Do I have a motion? We have a motion and a second. Representative Ogles, you are recognized, sir. And I believe we have an amendment that is untimely filed.
Yeah, yes, Chairman. Thank you, members of committee. It's drafting code 014340, and if it pleases the committee, I would like what this amendment does is it deletes section 9, which there was some question from Department of Safety. So rather than deal with that issue, we deleted that section to just clean up the bill and simplify it a bit. I'm still working with Department of Safety and some other stakeholders to try to remedy that situation, but for purpose of today, and if it pleases the committee, this untimely filed amendment would simply delete that section.
Posture we're in, we will have to vote to consider this amendment, so we have a motion. Do I have a second? We have a second. Any discussion on that? Seeing none, we'll be voting to consider adding amendment 014340. We'll be voting to consider that. So all in favor of consideration, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. So we will be considering this amendment at this point. So do I have a motion for the amendment? Motion. We have a motion and a second. Any explanation of the amendment, sir?
Thank you, Chairman. I think the previous explanation pretty much defines that. It just deletes section 9 from the bill and makes it will be then now if it pleases the committee, then after this is deleted, I'll explain the bill and it simplifies the bill.
Okay. Without objection, we will be voting on adding amendment drafting code 14340 to House Bill 2270. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The amendment goes on your bill, sir. Please explain.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, this bill, what it does is it simply commingles BUI and DUI, boating under the influence and driving under the influence. Your committee did great work, I believe, last year in this section of the code. What this bill does is simply brings those offenses on the water onto the land. For instance, if you have one offense of boating while intoxicated, that will count against your driving as intoxicated. So you get one on the water, one on the land, that counts as a previous offender. As the legislation was passed previously, there was not commingling for the sake of sentencing and enhancements for as previous offense. So with that, Chairman, I'll take any questions.
Thank you for that, sir. Do we have any questions for the sponsor? Representative Halsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I agree with the bill and voted all through the thing. I just had a procedural question that I don't understand. If a police officer stops somebody for driving under the influence and end up arresting them for that, they run a criminal history then to determine, not a criminal history, but a driving history to determine if they have been arrested for DUI in the last 10 years. The only thing that I know of, at least, that would show up on that database would be driving under the influence of a vehicle or driving a vehicle while under the influence. To my knowledge, does somebody who has been charged with DUI while operating a boat, do they feed that same data into this driving system so that an officer would know that there was an arrest made on this guy 5 years ago or 2 years ago for driving under or running a boat under the influence, and so now he's going to actually make the charge DUI second offense in the last 10 years? How would he know that?
Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Chairman, and that's a great question. It is my understanding that the bill, as drafted, the bill would come under effect. So the answer to your question is yes, it would be, and it would be added to their offense, and it would be searchable. We can go out of session and ask legal for clarification, and if the chairman so done.
Okay. Without objection, we will go out of session and consult with our legal department. We're out of session. We'll recognize Ms. Middleton.
Levin Middleton, Office of Legal Services. So this bill actually specifies that for that that computer record of prior offenses, it does not include BUIs. But what this does is require an indictment or other charging instrument that is saying that a person is a multiple offender must include their prior offenses, including BUIs.
Any questions for Ms. Middleton? Representative Halsey.
Okay, I'm a little slow. So, but that does mean if somebody is charged with operating a boat under the influence, that when that goes through the court proceedings in Sessions Court and they're found guilty, that information is going to be transferred over into the motor vehicle database so that an officer who runs this driving record next year will see that DUI on the boat.
Ms. Middleton.
The bill specifies that the certified computer printout only includes these other offenses like, aggravated vehicular assault, things like that. It does not include BUIs as it's currently drafted. That is my understanding.
Is that as amended?
Yes.
Okay. Any further questions? Representative Ogles.
Thank you, Chairman. And that's a great question. So if it pleases the committee, if that's a concern, I would be very welcome to an amendment as this moves forward in full. If you would like to add that to the piece of legislation, I would consider that a great amendment and actually to strengthen the piece of legislation. So if the representative would like that included in the database, I would definitely take that at a later date as a friendly amendment to the piece of legislation.
We're currently out of session, so any more questions for Ms. Middleton on this? Seeing none, we'll go back into session. We're back in session now. Any more comments from the representative? Anyone on the committee have any further comments or questions? We have questions been called. Without any objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 2270 as amended. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Your bill moves on to full, sir.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee.
Next item we have is House Bill 2653 by Representative Clemens. We have a motion and a second. You're recognized, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Many of you remember last week on the House floor when I stood up to honor the memory of Miss Toulouse Schuyler Quinn, who passed away at the age of 42 of glioblastoma. Her organization, Nashville Food Project, I spoke briefly about what that organization does, but they brought this legislation to me and Senator Yarborough. The Nashville Food Project is located in our district, and I believe Mill Ridge Park, where they do some farming, is in Representative Potts' district. What this bill does is it provides a clarification to the definition of vacant public land under the Community Gardening Act that was passed previously by Senator Nicely and Representative G.A. Hardaway. And the Senate passed this bill last night on its consent calendar, and so I would ask, move the bill for passage in this committee, and I'm happy to answer any questions as to what the legislation does.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions for the sponsor? Representative Reedy, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Clemens. I'm proud to support this. I've seen this when I was a young man stationed in Germany, these small areas outside of the big cities. They were doing exactly what has been happening here in Nashville with the Tennessee Community Gardens, and I just wish more counties would become involved in the same gardening techniques and getting more people out of the house, out of the big city, out in the countryside and digging in the dirt. Thank you, sir.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, without objection, we'll be voting on House Bill 2653. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Your bill moves on, sir.
Thank you.
Next, we have House Bill 2033 by Representative Freeman, and I believe Representative Gillespie is presenting this bill today. Do I have a motion? We have a motion and a second, and I believe there's an amendment on this bill. Representative Gillespie, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Last year, we passed the CPACE bill, and once it became law, the local governments realized that there's some clarifications needed to be made for the bill. This bill does have an amendment that clarifies local governments are held harmless. The other change that this bill addresses is if local government owns or lives a property but leases it to a third party, then the third party can also acquire the CPACE loan. And with that, I renew my motion.
We'll hold up just a second. I was told you were on this bill, but there's some question about whether you've signed on to this bill or not to be able to co-sponsor. Okay. We don't show that you've signed on to this, sir.
Can I do? Wow. Okay.
We will, we'll actually need to roll this bill 1 week in order for you to get signed on, or Representative Freeman to be here. I know he had a health-related appointment to be at, so, and we certainly understand the need for this. So, without objection, we will roll that bill 1 week. Next, we have item number 10. This is House Bill 2328 by Representative Grills. Do I have a motion? We have a motion and a second. Representative Grills, you are recognized at the podium, sir. We do see an amendment on this bill. If you can help address that, sir.
Yes, sir. 013718.
That's what we have. You want to explain, does that make the bill?
It clarifies the bills.
Okay, so it's clarification. Y'all want to go ahead and put this amendment on? Without objection, I'll need, do I have a motion and a second on the amendment? We have a motion and a second on the amendment. So all in favor of putting this amendment on House Bill 2328, say aye.
I'm sorry, I don't know what the amendment does. I'm trying to get to it.
I think the feeling was put the amendment on and let him explain it as amended. So all in favor of adding amendment drafting code 13718 to the bill, please say aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. Now please explain the bill as amended, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And this legislation exempts from local and regional zoning and planning regulations or other local restrictions the reclamation of a formerly operating borrow excavation, surface mining operation, or quarry that agrees to receive fill or borrow material from the state construction projects provided that the fill work complies with the requirements of the Water Control Act of 1977, is not located on a street or road currently operating below level of service C, or is located on a street or road that would be reduced below the service C by traffic generated by the reclamation operation. In all other ways, satisfies the state rules and regulations applicable to the field activity. And the amendment that we put on there in consultation, Representative Cochran and I went back and forth 2 or 3 weeks to making sure this amendment was put on there. The amendment clarifies that this exemption does not apply to local and regional zoning or planning regulations or other restrictions, including excavation limitations, street standards, weight limits, or the use of streets by vehicles that are in effect at the time of the filing of an application for any required permit under Water Control Quality Act of 1977 with TDEC. Simply put, this legislation prevents local governments from retroactively changing the regulations applicable to the reclamation of a formerly operating borrow excavation surface mining operation or quarry whenever the owner of the site previously complied with all relevant state law requirements to fill the activity.
Okay, and we do have someone on our list to testify today that wanted to speak on this bill. So without objection, we'll go out of session and hear this testimony. We're out of session. I'll call up Mr. Philip Johnson to speak, and just you can stand there at the podium or either one. That'll be fine, sir. And just identify yourself. And
thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee. First, I'd like to say that none of my opposition to this bill, and I thank you for allowing me to speak on this, in any way reflects my feelings about the sponsor. He's a good man. I know him to be a good man and honorable. I'm a resident of this community. I'm speaking only on behalf of my community and my residents around me, the neighborhood around this area. I live basically across the road from this rock quarry. My concern is that this exempts this particular area because of the permit it obtained. Well, the permit does not take into account the impact on the community, and that's the issue. The impact on the community is going to be devastating. I used to represent, as a state legislator, the Cheatham County, and this is going to affect the entire south part of my county. And so I speak on today in opposition to this bill for myself and for my neighbors. Bellevue community does not want this. Cheatham County does not want this, and so I ask you to oppose it. The other reason I ask you to oppose it is because having been a legislator and having sat in that chair right there, I'll tell you an experience that I had. And when I carried a bill for a lobbying organization that affected 2 hospitals in another area of this state, particularly yours, Mr. Chairman, and my good friend, Curtis Halford. Issue is different. 2 hospitals fighting over access to patient care, but the politics are the same. I carried a bill that affected another legislator's district, not only one, but several. And these were people that I highly respected. I learned a lesson from that. In my 10 years as a service, relationships matter. In your district, you were elected to represent the people of your district, and it's not really appropriate for a representative to move into another area and carry a bill that area does not want. I learned that lesson, and I just ask you not to make the same mistake I did. To this day, I regret that, in that it caused harm to my relationship with Curtis Halford as a colleague. Although he's been gracious and kind to me ever since then, I've always known that was a bad thing that I did. And I respect, and everybody from that area, former Representative Jimmy Eldridge at that time, he was a freshman with me. So I ask you not to do this, and go down this path of going into other people's districts for things they do not want. And I ask you to learn from my experience and not make the same mistake I did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Appreciate your comments. Does anybody have any questions for Mr. Johnson? Seeing none, we'll go back into session. Back in session. And any questions or comments on the bill? Representative Halsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are we on the amendment?
We're on the bill as amended, sir.
Bill as amended, okay. I agree with everything that man said, and you and I are friends, and I admire you a great deal as a sponsor. I have a problem with the bill. The amendment, if I'm reading it right, says that no local government agency, no county government agency, no zoning commission, no planning or regulation can override whatever or limit the owner or operator's ability to reclaim a site no matter what. I mean, that's the way the amendment reads to me. I could be wrong. Am I reading it wrong?
Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What particular part of the amendment are you talking about there?
The very first part establishes that no law, local or regional zoning or planning regulation or other local restrictions or rules or regulations that explicitly or implicitly limit the owner's or owner-operator's ability to reclaim a site. I understand you got private property in the middle of all this, but if I'm reading the amendment right, it says that irregardless of any regulations by a governmental body, that they can do what they want to. Am I reading it wrong?
Representative Grills, and I think he's reading from a summary, so.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What this bill does, Chairman Halsey, is whenever you apply for the permit, that's the rules you have to play by. And because after the permitting process starts to take place, whether you're received or denied, you can't change the rules after the permitting process starts to take place, just because you have whatever reason.
Okay.
Representative Halsey.
Okay. The next thing I just want to bring up that I've seen us do, and I saw it the other night when we injected ourselves in a fight between Memphis's mayor and city council, and we injected ourselves in the middle of that, and I've seen it a whole lot more frequent down here and sometimes I've participated in it. But there comes a time when local folks they do it right. They go through their county commission, they go through their city government, they go through their zoning commission, and they let their wishes be known. And then we in the state sometimes come over the top of that and say, we don't care what you want. We're going to stick our nose in your business and make a decision for you. And I have a problem on that issue with this bill and what that community wants and what they don't want.
Representative Grills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the intention, Chairman Halsey, is to make sure that locals have input, and that's what the permitting process is for. There is a time period when that permitting process takes place that you come before the TDEC and you make your cases. I believe that took place. I think it took, this particular issue here may have taken 12 or 14 months, maybe 18 months. But my problem with it, with what happened, was when I first got involved in politics was 2010. There was an issue back home where they were trying to start a gun range. They had done everything they were supposed to do, and when they found out where the gun range was going, a couple of people got aggravated and been out of shape over it, so they went to the Planning Commission and they started trying to change the rules to shut down something that had already started. And that right there, Chairman Halsey, in my opinion, is unethical and probably immoral, because once you start the game, you can't change the rules.
Representative Halsey. Okay. Representative Shaw.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And sponsor, previous speakers have made the case, including this veteran cemetery. I guess my question to you is, how would you feel if somebody came to your district? Well, let me put it this way. Whoever represent that area, if this is a problem, why would not the local representative be taking care of this? I had 110 calls in 11 minutes from this community yesterday afternoon about this. So while I don't know exactly what your intentions are, but the community is very upset about this. And my colleague to my right makes a good case. This year, more than ever, I see other legislators getting involved in other people's district. I wouldn't want you down in Bolivar carrying a bill. To me, it would seem like I'm really not doing my job. If the citizens want something, it just would appear they would come to me and say, this is what we want to do, and this is why we want to do it. I've got a problem with this like it is. I really do.
Representative Grills, just for clarification, this does have statewide impact. It's not just a local bill, correct?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's what I was wanting to reference right there. Yes, sir, that is correct. And he asked the question, well, go ahead. I'm not going to say that.
Next on the list, we have Representative Cochran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to your point, Chairman Grills, I did want to say, I know you mentioned earlier you wanted to make sure that, that a local government can't retroactively come back and change the rules. And one of my big concerns with the bill initially was that I wanted to make sure that the state government couldn't arbitrarily supersede a local government just because the state wanted that field pit. And so that's where we got to with our amendment. I just wanted to clarify that a little bit, and thank you for working with me on that. But again, that was my initial concern with it as well. But I appreciate you putting the language in there to make sure that if those regulations are in place already, that the state can't just supersede those. So just wanted to thank you for that.
Representative Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and sponsors, I find myself in a predicament, and I don't know what our options are, but out of respect to the sponsor, I wanted to ask, kind of tell you what I'm facing and ask if it's possible. With some information that was literally just brought that I haven't had time to get answers to, that I think some committee members would be aware, want to be aware of, and I know the sponsor, stepped out and spoke to him just a second ago, and he kind of wasn't completely aware, but I want to make sure I understand the context. So I guess what I'm asking is, do we have the option as a committee to roll this a week so that we can get answers to these questions and make sure we're making the best decisions and everybody's aware of what's going on?
We can certainly roll this to the Hill, and we may not get to the Hill today.
I would appreciate that. I don't know what procedure I need to take or what we need to do, or if you can just do that, but I would truly appreciate that.
If the representative is amenable, we can roll this bill to the Hill and work on that. You're recognized, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'm at the will of the committee and your chairmanship here. I'm want to see this bill move forward, so whatever it takes to move it forward to make sure that every question is answered, but Representative Hurt and any other questions that might be asked need to have answers.
Thank you, sir. I think we all take this job very seriously, and we want to make sure that the impacts are well documented and well known, and that we're as best educated as we can be. So without objection, we'll roll House Bill 2328 as amended to the Hill of today's calendar. Without objection. Next. We have one other change on our calendar, House Bill 2740, which is item 2 on the calendar, has been rolled 2 weeks. Without objection, that's rolled 2 weeks. Yes, sir. That brings us to, let's see. Oh, he's rolled. Item number 15, House Bill 2149 by Chairman Hawford, I believe. You have a motion and a second. Mr. Chairman, you are recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2149 deals with it's an administration bill that deals with the Carroll County watershed in, of course, Carroll County.
I think we have an amendment on this bill.
We do, and that amendment is
We have a motion and a second on drafting code, amendment with drafting code 13780. And does that make the bill?
Yes, it does.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second.
13780, that's right.
We have a motion and a second, so without objection, we'll vote on on adding amendment drafting code 13780 to House Bill 2149. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? The ayes have it. The bill is amended with this drafting code. Mr. Chairman, you are recognized to describe the amendment.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. And what the amendment does, there actually is a line item in the budget that addresses this. This would allow payoff of the debt of the Carroll County Watershed Authority and turn it over to the operation of TWRA, and would eventually, as I understand, would be a part of the Bill Dance fishing tour. So long story short, Mr. Chairman, I guess what I'm asking is confirmation of that and of the line item in the budget. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd be welcome to answer questions if I can.
I know I have some questions that may need to be answered by the administration and by the Wildlife Resources Agency. And I don't know if anybody else has any questions for the sponsor first, or we go out of session and do that. Without objection, we'll go out of session and ask Brent Easley to come up and answer some questions for us. So we are out of session. You may stand or sit, sir. Just identify yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Brent Easley, the Governor's Legislative Director.
Thank you, sir. Anyone have any questions for Mr. Easley before I ask? Seeing none, I will. I'm actually concerned about some language and what it actually means, what it does physically, that allows the agency to acquire property. Can you give us a rundown of what that means and in this specific situation? Because as I understand it, there's not much property there. The property around the lake almost is entirely privately owned, and I'm just concerned about setting up a situation where a state agency can go in and acquire property through whatever means, and if you can expound on that, that would help.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The intent of the legislation here is that we had a conversation with the folks at TWRA a while back, and the property that is currently owned and operated by the Watershed Authority as a part of the 1,000-acre lake, that they would take those assets and manage them moving forward. We have not had a conversation about acquiring additional property as a part of this as well. The intent is that this is specific to what the watershed oversees and owns at this moment.
Okay, the language does say, though, that they can enter into agreements for with some nonprofit corporations to acquire options and pre-acquire on behalf of the state interest in lands at the lake specifically. It talks about some surveying and other opportunities there that they can enter into agreements for. And that's the part that concerns me, and just what really does that mean?
Mr. Chairman, I would have to talk to someone on our legal team to give you a further legal definition of that.
Okay, that's one of my bigger concerns. Representative Cochran, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Easley, just to piggyback on that a little bit, and just to clarify, I guess, just for the record, it's not the state of Tennessee's intent that they would have any kind of eminent domain power, maybe specifically.
Mr. Easley?
Yes, sir, that's correct. The lake is already established. The property around the lake, the easements off the water, the marina, any assets that they have currently, those are all already established.
Okay, and I just wanted to clarify that. I appreciate that.
Anyone else have any questions? And do I understand correctly that there is a line item in the budget to, and can you explain what that line item does, how much it is and what it does?
Yes, sir. The line item currently in the budget as proposed by the governor is for $11 million. In the supplemental budget, you'll see an adjustment upward to about $11.1 million. It's slightly under what the actual debt for the Watershed Authority is currently. So the intent is to true that up to what the actual debt is.
And then to do what with that money?
So that funding would be used to pay off the debt that is currently owed, so that when new management comes in for the lake, that they would be able to do that free and clear and not have to worry about the continued debt payments moving forward.
Can you describe the current legal situation from the standpoint of who has the debt, who's responsible for it ultimately?
Yes, sir. So currently, the Watershed Authority has issued the debt. The debt is leveraged against the city of Huntington. They are in a financially precarious situation and heading toward default on that. The city of Huntington has indicated to the comptroller's office that they can continue payments on that on behalf of the Watershed Authority for no more than one fiscal year before that time and resources have run out.
Representative Shaw.
I just want to ask our speakers, so all this TWA would be taking over the responsibilities of what the watershed is now supposed to be doing, basically, is what we're saying. No more, no less. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Easley? Seeing none, thank you, sir, for being here. Appreciate you coming to help us with this. I would ask Mr. Chris Richardson if he would come up and try to clarify a few things. For the record, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris Richardson, Deputy Director, TWRA.
Thank you, sir. I did notice that this had a not significant fiscal note on it, and I'm curious as to how in the world that is possible. Borrowing the note and paying that off, how can an agency take over management of a lake and the property next to that lake, some which on the that you'll be acquiring, without any cost?
It is our understanding, Mr. Chairman, in talking with both Senate sponsor and the House sponsor and the governor's office, that the intention of the local community, there are some dollars in particular, property tax growth in an overlay associated with the lake that is earmarked currently for lake operations. And it has been represented to us that those monies would now flow from the watershed to the agency for those annual operating costs.
Most fiscal notes that we see show that income and the expense so that we have some documentation of that. This does not. Can you address maybe approximately what those are?
We can. We've done as close of a budget as we can based on what we know and our touring of those facilities. We estimate that it's going to take 3 employees and about a $300,000 annual recurring cost to maintain and operate that lake as it has been. And we're told that the revenues that are currently earmarked for lake operations are sufficient to cover those potential expenditures.
That is pretty significant in my eyes to be not significant. So I'm curious how we ever got to a not significant fiscal note, but I appreciate you explaining that. And what, in your understanding, will be the status of this current watershed authority or the Carroll County Lake Authority if this goes through and the note's paid off?
It would be my understanding that the watershed authority would still exist. They just would no longer have responsibilities for the maintenance and operation of the 1,000-acre lake, and that those specific duties would be transferred to the Tennessee Wildlife Resource Agency.
Would they still be taking in funds from the launching fees and dock fees and things like that, and then transferring those funds to TWRA, or how does the money work there?
My expectation and understanding is that as far as the daily permits or fees associated with lake usage, we would assess those as the agency, and the Watershed Authority would no longer have responsibility in that regard. With regard to the local revenues that have also been discussed, I'm not clear on exactly how that money would flow.
Okay. Representative Cochran?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I'm going to, again, kind of use that same general topic of questions. So in some previous discussions on this, I think maybe it was discussed, is there a wheel tax? So you think there's a wheel tax as well as a certain portion of the property tax that is reserved? Can you give me a little more information on that? And then I've got a couple follow-ups, if that's okay.
Mr. Richardson?
Yes, sir. Representative Cochran, it is my understanding that there currently is a wheel tax that was utilized in an effort to pay for the lake and its operations. And my understanding is that at least for some period of time, that wheel tax would remain in place to cover lake operations in addition to the property tax overlays at the local level that we are expecting to eventually catch up and cover those annual costs to where the wheel tax could at some point in the future be removed.
Representative Cochran?
Okay, and what does that look like as far as, I guess there's some kind of memorandum of understanding that would be entered between TWRA maybe and the county or the city government, or I guess it would be the county government, right? And have y'all done that in the past? Do you have some previous experience entering that kind of an agreement? I know this is a very unique situation, and we can't let it default. So this may be kind of some uncovered ground, but I'm just curious. I didn't know if you've faced a situation like this.
Mr. Richardson?
Certainly, Representative Cochran, this is a unique situation, and I'm not familiar with another one that the TWRA is involved in where we are dependent upon local revenues. We are in those discussions about a memorandum of understanding or some sort of instrument with our bill sponsors to ensure those things are in place before we take over any operations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And that brings up some other points that I have learned of, and I'm not sure what's fact and what's fiction, and you may or may not know, and I don't expect you to comment on something you're not familiar with, but I'd understood that there was an agreement made with the county, Carroll County, some years ago when this lake was built, that the increased property tax revenue from the improvements around the lake would go to pay off this debt, and now the county's decided they'd rather keep that money. Do you know anything about that? Have you heard that or know of that?
The only discussion that I am aware of there, Chairman Todd, is that earmarked revenue associated with the property tax growth, at least it's been some stated intention that would be the money that would ultimately flow to the agency for those recurring operational costs for the lake. I've not heard any indication that there is a desire for the county to keep that money.
I, like Representative Cochran, have a concern about that and wanting to make sure that we have something solid in place. It's not just a gentleman's agreement on the side, but it's something in writing that we as a state can rely on, and not see a situation of where the agency comes back to us in years down the road and says, you know, we thought we were going to get $350,000 a year in, and they've decided not to give that to us, so we expect the General Assembly, since you passed this bill, to fund this, because I know we have done that previously where we have to fund something that is not an agency directive. So, that's certainly a concern of mine as well.
Certainly, we share that concern, Chairman, and we're work diligently in that regard to ensure we would like the same assurances that you're seeking there.
Chairman Halford?
I would tell you that there's a meeting scheduled in my office tomorrow at 12 noon between the county, some representatives from the county mayor, probably some from the county commission, our senator, myself, and some other interested parties to work these kind of details out.
Okay.
So.
All right. Any more questions for our witness? Seeing none, we'll go back into session. Thank you, sir, for helping out here. We're back in session. Considering our time and we've got to give up this room, do I hear a motion to adjourn? We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Opposed? We're adjourned.